Yesterday, we talked about the 2021 NASCAR Cup Series champion, Kyle Larson. Well, today we're going to wind it back a year and we're going to talk about the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series champion, Chase Elliott. We're going to do his championship case today. So, of course, we do this for all 16 playoff drivers. No, these are not predictions. We do this for all 16, guys. I made the playlist. The Larson video is already in there. This video will be in there as soon as it's uploaded. So if you watch this 3 weeks in advance or you're watching it the week of the playoffs and you're looking for Ryan Blaney, Daniel Suarez, Christopher Bell, they will all be in a playlist. If you're watching this as of the time it's being uploaded, I have a schedule out in the community post for these first 12 that are already locked into the playoffs. But let's talk about Chase Elliott's 2024 season. Yesterday, we talked about Larson. We gave his numbers. Chase Elliott, while only 10 points separate him from his teammate Kyle Larson, their seasons could not be more different. It's pretty crazy. Elliott has one win that came at Texas in April. He has 7 top 5s, 11 top 10s. He has 0 DNFs, which is a big deal. He's led 179 laps. He has 1 stage win, and his worst finish this season is 21st. So Elliott, as I said with Larson has led a bunch of laps. He's won a bunch of stages, but he has a few DNFs. He has a few poor finishes, and that's why this points battle is so close. But Chase Elliott, when we look at the big picture, when we look at this playoff format, if this was 21 years ago, the Winston Cup format, Chase Elliott, I'd tell him to keep doing what you're doing. Keep being consistent. I know you haven't had winning speed every week, but in that format, that's how you won championships. Being consistent, finishing races, not having poor results. But under this format, it's different, and it's something we have to acknowledge. Yesterday with Kyle Larson, we said get as many playoff points as you can. Same goes for Chase Elliott, but the difference is he doesn't have the points Larson has. He doesn't have the wins. He doesn't have the stage wins. He only has 6 to his name right now. That's why I'm going to say the same thing for Tyler Reddick tomorrow. He has to win the regular season championship. Those 15 bonus points are huge. When you're not winning races, when you're not winning stages, the fact that you have a shot at the regular season championship, you've got to get it, if you ask me. Playoff points, there's no such thing as too many of them. Winning races obviously gets you them stage wins. And Chase Elliott, he's led the 10th most laps in NASCAR this season. But ultimately, he's been consistent, top 5, top 10, but he hasn't quite had that winning speed like Larson, Hamlin, and even Byron have had. And so if they want to advance deep in these playoffs, they're going to need some playoff points. Now, on the bright side, if they can keep up this consistency, I think it actually works out quite well for them. Yes, they don't have the points, but as long as they're finishing races, running in the top 10 every few weeks, or really consistent few weeks, and then getting some top 5s on top of that, I think this can get them into the playoffs deep. But you do have to weigh in. You do have to think, well, what if that DNF happens during the playoffs and suddenly you're in a must-win situation when really there's only been a handful of times they've had a winning speed, and that's an argument that could be made. And it's honestly my biggest concern for Chase Elliott. They haven't had winning speed a lot this year. The consistency's really carried them throughout the season. It's going to get them some bonus points in the regular season standings, but at the end of the day, this format is about performing here and now when it comes to round 1, round 2, round 3, and you can't afford to have your one bad race anytime in the playoffs and put yourself in a bad position. However, some of these tracks in the playoffs are actually really good for Chase Elliott. Yesterday for Larson, we talked about how poor Larson runs at the super speedways. Well, Chase Elliott is actually quite the opposite in this next-gen era. At Atlanta, since the reconfiguration, since it's become a super speedway, his worst finish is 15th. He has a win there back in 2022. He has multiple wins on super speedways in this next-gen era. He has another top 10 back in 2022. So Atlanta, as long as he doesn't crash it, he'll finish in the top 15 in this race. And that may be what it takes. Let's say he wins the regular season championship. Let's say he steals a stage somewhere. That's 16 extra points. He has 22 points to his name. Worst case scenario, he finishes 4th in the standings, has 7 points to his name, and he's got 13 total. And that's where you can't afford a crash. But thankfully, these next 2 tracks are quite well for Chase Elliott, or quite good, I should say. Elliott's won multiple times at Watkins Glen, And yes, he has a very bad finish last year, but they were in a must-win situation. They had to be aggressive with the strategy, and they ran themselves out of fuel. But Elliott has always been a contender at Watkins Glen since 2018, won there in 2019, runner-up in 2021. 2022 was competing for the win, led the most laps in that race before ultimately finishing in the top 5. He will be a contender at Watkins Glen, so I have no concern there. And as for Bristol, it's more good news. He is a runner-up back in 2022. He won the All-Star race at Bristol in 2020, and he's finished top 10 in every next-gen race at this track. So Bristol is one of Chase Elliott's better ovals, and honestly, with the combination of Bristol and the combination of Watkins Glen, I don't think it matters what he does at Atlanta. As long as he doesn't crash out lap 1, maybe get some stage points, but the fact of the matter is, there's going to be some playoff guys who wreck at Atlanta with you if you wreck, even if you do wreck on lap 1. And I think Elliott and the 9 team are good enough at Watkins Glen and Bristol. They can make up for any error at Atlanta, and they can advance to that next round. As for that next round, it gets not as complicated, but, once again, there is that issue that there's a super speedway and a road course. But as I said, wild card races happen. Things happen, so let's look at the non-wild card race. Kansas. Chase Elliott has a win at Kansas, actually back in 2018. And in fact, in the most recent race at Kansas, he finished 3rd. And Chase Elliott, I don't really think of as a guy who runs great at these intermediate tracks. Not really a mile-and-a-half kind of guy, but actually this year, I feel like he has improved a lot. Remember that one win he has this year is at Texas, a mile-and-a-half. He finished 3rd at Kansas, as I said, top 10 at Charlotte. So really, I feel like he's done much better on these mile-and-a-halves. They've found a little bit of something. I know they won at Texas, but they still aren't quite at the level of Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., some of those Toyota guys, but they have made their way to the front. They have been running much better, and that gives me promise. This race will more than likely be a somewhat normal race. I know Kansas can get chaotic, but last year they ran really well in the fall. Honestly, Kansas last fall was one of their best races of the season. They finished 6th, led 47 laps, and that was a year where it seemed like everything was going wrong. So Kansas has been a better track for Elliott. I think they can get a top 10 out of that. And then we go to a track that's honestly one of his better tracks. It's one of the only tracks in NASCAR that he has multiple wins at, including one win in the next-gen era back in 2022. And in fact, his worst finish in the next-gen era is 15th. So Chase Elliott, just like Atlanta, he finishes these races. He runs really well at these super speedways, and he finishes. And if he can do that, that's going to be huge. If he can run top 10 at Kansas, he can survive the chaos at Talladega, pick up some stage points, he'll have a good gap, and it's going into his best racetrack, the Charlotte Roval, another track that Chase Elliott has multiple wins at. And Chase Elliott statistically at the Roval just is something else. He's led laps in every single race except for the inaugural race. In fact, half of those he's led 25 plus laps, and 4 of those 6 races he's led 15 or more laps. He's won stages at this racetrack. His worst finish is 20th, but that was a late race restart in 2022. He got spun out. He was leading up until that point. So Chase Elliott at the Charlotte Roval is something else. Even without the back of his car, he finished 12th in 2021. So the Charlotte Roval, even if Kansas, they show up with a bad car, Talladega, they reckon they're in a must-win situation. If they're in a must-win situation, this is one of the top 2 tracks I would pick for Chase Elliott. It would be the top one. We'll talk about number 2 here in a minute. And so even if they're in a must-win, this is a great opportunity. But honestly, I think just like this first round, I'm honestly not that concerned. Now, if there's a crash at Talladega, even if there's a crash at Kansas, it puts a little bit more pressure on you. But with this being the Roval, you've got a great opportunity at winning. And then we get to the round of 8, and this is where my concern comes, because Chase Elliott, even if he wins the regular season title, even if he wins a race maybe, he'll have 25, 30-ish points, which is a good amount. And honestly, that's going to be a decent buffer. Let's say the bottom guy has 10 to 15 points. He'll have a little bit of a gap there, but these first 2 races in the round of 8 are not exactly the races I think Chase Elliott would want to pick. In this next-gen era, he has a best finish of 9th at Las Vegas. His other finishes are 21st, 32nd, and 12th. So Vegas just really has not been his track in the next gen era. And even before that, it was hit or miss on speed or crashing or whatever. So Vegas has been kind of a wild card, it seems, for Elliott. And then we go on to Homestead, and it doesn't get much better. His best finish is second, but that was in the Gen 6 back in 2020. Other than that, 14th, 14th, 15th, 15th. It's not been great at Homestead, but as I said, the one bright spot, despite the numbers not looking good for Elliott at Vegas and Homestead, is that team has improved their speed on the mile and a half. At Texas, at Kansas, at Charlotte, they've been consistently in the top 10, every once in a while leading some laps, being up there in the top 5, showing up at the checkered flag with Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher in that photo finish. So they've improved there, which gives a little bit glimmer of a hope. But as I said, these would not be the tracks Chase Elliott would choose in the round of 8. However, this next track is Martinsville. Chase Elliott at Martinsville, whether it's the old car or the new car, he has done great at Martinsville. Of course, won there in 2020 in a must-win situation, so he knows how to get it done in a must-win situation to advance to the Final Four. He led 64 laps there in the spring, finished third in that race, was in the top 3 all day long, and that's why even if they run 16th at Homestead in Vegas, they're below the cutoff line. They're in a must-win situation. 1, they know how to get it done. 2, Martinsville has been a great track to them. They led 83 laps in this race last fall. It's finished 17th despite that, but they led laps. 4 top 10s in the 5 next-gen era races, so they know how to lead laps. They know how to be up front. This is the second track I'd pick. If it was an elimination race for Chase Elliott, number 1 would be the Roval, which is the last round. Number 2 would be Martinsville, which is this round. And Chase Elliott at Martinsville is a great combination, and if it comes down to it, even if they're in a good points position coming into this race, I think they're a heavy favorite to make Phoenix at that point because they're going to run in the top 5. They're going to lead laps in this race. They're going to collect the necessary stage points unless something goes wrong, of course. But even if they come in with their backs against the wall, needing a win, needing to perform now, they can very well do it at this track. So Chase Elliott, it may be a difficult journey coming into this round of 8 in terms of Vegas and Homestead, but Martinsville is a great place for him. Then we go to Phoenix. If they advance to Phoenix, as I said, man, this format, anything can happen. You never know. But I will say Chase Elliott in the Gen 6 era at Phoenix was very good, but in this next gen era, it's been a little bit shakier. Finishes all outside the top 10. Now, he did get crashed in the fall race in 2022, but still not the greatest numbers since the next-gen era. He did score some stage points in the spring. He did qualify well, but finished 19th on the day. But as I said, with Larson yesterday, he's won in this format before. He knows how to get it done. They're going to show up with their best stuff at Phoenix. They're not going to show up with a 19th place car, I don't think. There's a reason they'd be in that Final Four. But in conclusion for Chase Elliott, just like everyone else, you got to get your bonus points. You got to get some playoff points. And with you got to win the regular season, man. You got to get those points because it's going to be a close points battle. It's an unpredictable first 2 rounds. But on the bright side, you are one of the better super speedway racers in this car. You are one of the best road course racers in NASCAR, and the way the elimination race is set up for you are some really good tracks. Bristol, even, if he's in a tough situation, he's got a runner-up in this next-gen era. The Charlotte Roval, it doesn't matter what generation of car. He leads laps. He wins stages. He wins races at the Roval. And then going to Martinsville, same situation. He knows how to win there. Even if they're in a must-win situation, he knows how to win. And as for Phoenix, you never know what could happen. But that is championship case number 2. Check. Tomorrow, Tyler Reddick, our first Toyota driver. We will talk about him and his championship case heading into these playoffs. That should be a fun one. Then we go on through our schedule. I think Denny Hamlin after that and so on and so forth. You can look at the schedule yourself. This will be added to the playlist. As I said, if you miss Reddick's tomorrow, it will be in that same playlist. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.